So just remind everyone we can project our questions to any of the panelists now, so anything that comes to mind, please.
I have a question here. It's okay. My question is for Anne. Do you look at... Sorry?
Go ahead. Mm-hmm. We have a question right here. We'll start with that one and then Jeff.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So my question is for Anne. Do you look at the general agricultural management as ways to change the whole agriculture into more sustainable from the food production, basically changing the diet? Is it any road that you look at?
From changing people's diets, that's not really a role that USDA plays. I think that's other than to provide nutritional guidelines, general guidelines. But I think what we're seeing is, and this is a really fascinating piece of what's going on in this country in terms of sustainability, are the market forces. We have major agricultural, along the entire supply chain of agriculture, you've got companies that are looking to market to an increasingly demanding customer base for sustainably produced products, whether it's products that help improve water quality or protect habitat. And I think, to my mind, that's going to be a really important force going forward, and one that I think we all need to start accounting for. And one of the things that NRCS is doing is creating sort of a stewardship framework, helping producers get a feel for how effective their conservation practices are in improving natural resource protections so that they can position themselves in an increasingly demanding marketplace.
My question is related. In listening to the economics and the way it's driven much of practices just in California, but also the United States, then I was struck by the talk about trying to reduce the amount of sugar that we consume. I was wondering what proportion of corn has gone from a food product to a sugar product to a fuel product, and how do we have that kind of a discussion, not just in California, but nationwide?
Yeah, as to the percentage of corn that goes into producing high fructose corn syrup and ethanol, I'm less of an expert on that. I couldn't really speak to that. To the broader question, I think, again, these are conversations that are happening at a state and federal level, that are happening in the marketplace. What I can speak to is the effort within certain parts of USDA to better generate the kind of data and information that's necessary for us broadly as consumers, as businesses, and as state and federal agencies to make a certain set of policy choices. But beyond that, I think there are others at USDA better suited to speak to specifics on that.
Yeah, my question's about recharge and environmental stewardship or farm stewardship, and I'm wondering whether there's scope, if you think about the farm management in the kind of upland areas where you get most of the groundwater recharge occurring, for bringing together kind of farm management practice which slows down the water in the landscape and does other kind of contouring practices and so on to improve the recharge in those areas to benefit the plains. This is an idea which occurred to me talking to some of the farmer conservation people in Australia, but I'm not aware that there's been too many studies done, so I'm just wondering whether, for example, Dave, whether or not you're aware of things in that area.
So there's been a lot of work on contour ploughing, as you say, and various other management strategies that try to keep the moisture in the soil. I don't think they've been designed so much to improve recharge, but I do think that they have that potential. One thing that, again, we can look at with the kinds of models that we're using and other people are using is to expressly look at those components. You've also seen some other presentations about, using available water, outside of the growing season to recharge the groundwater. So even in fairly arid regions, there are flooding events, and if we can capture some of that water and basically do conjunctive use management, and we can test the ability of that to work before we invest a huge amount of money in those systems through these kinds of models.
So this sort of general question, something I learned in this conference. So we have been actually using this for probably Dave and Anka. You are looking at two types of models, very large scale, and the Mike Shee type of models, integrated model, a little more refined in their physics in compared to that scale. So I mean, in a way, the farmers or the growers' question, we don't want to be governed by models, may be a valid question, because I think we are looking at these large scale regional models, and then the physics of those models, bring climate drivers and other issues into these models. You may find that the physics at the scale of the farmer may be more important. The uncertainties, you may have difficulty convincing the farmers about the uncertainty. That uncertainty may be too large. The test will be like, once you get the 500 stations, what happens if you don't match some of the stations with some of your predictions? I mean, they have a very strong case. Your models are no good.
Well, they definitely have. And we never tried to sell it like you can use it on the farm scale or on the field scale. For obviously, even though we use the most sophisticated models, we wouldn't have the data to support it. So that's actually what I meant by my last slide. So now we can provide some modeling and some uncertainty, but we still have to frame that into what is the scale that we're going to use it at. And then I think maybe educate some of the decision makers on when they hear the term models, they ask you, well, how much am I going to irrigate next year or something? They don't ask, how can I use the model to actually manage better in a way? What can the model do for me? And that's what we need to educate them in. Don't ask for this specific question, but how do I use this? It's a tool. How do I use this tool optimally?
So this is a question for each of you on the panel, because you have sort of two folks working on the larger policy side and two of you on the research side. For your respective worlds, so U.S., Europe, or globally, and this is now a magic wand question, which I'd like to ask. If you had a magic wand, what would you change in our current regulatory policy structure to help us, and us meaning everybody from the probably really the growing and the water side, this whole complex we're talking about, to manage it better? What would you like to see happen? Because I think, as I'm hearing from the questions like to Anne, I think most people from Europe in the audience don't realize USDA has no regulatory authority. That's not part of the U.S. system. All water is pretty much regulated supplies at the state level or agreements between states. So I'm just curious, as you look at these problems from each of your perspectives, what would you like to see happen? Magic wand.
Great, I get to start. All right. So I'm going to come at it from a non-regulatory perspective, but I think for good reason. I think one of the most powerful things that we can do is to put information at as granular a scale as possible into the hands of producers. If they know where their water is now and into the future, and if they know how they fit into the larger, say, watershed scale, basin scale strategy for managing that water, I think they can make the right set of decisions. Farmers and ranchers are really smart business people. If you give them that information, and I would argue that we also continue to provide the technical and financial support that USDA and states and others provide, I think what you're doing is you're unleashing sort of the entrepreneurial spirit, the stewardship spirit of all these people all across the country to do the right thing. But because we do have a knowledge gap, whether it's, being able to measure water, being able to measure the results of certain conservation practice changes. And to Anker's, challenge, I was thinking, boy, we've got similar situations like that in the United States where producers say, don't manage me through a model. But if you can show them real numbers, concrete numbers that relate to, at a scale that's useful to them, I think, to my mind, that could be a game changer. We've got a long way to go, but we can get there.
So I'd like to see less barriers between the policymakers, the scientists, and the farmers, because in reality, we all want the same thing. So, we as scientists are trying to provide frameworks that policies can be made, which then hopefully also really help out the farmers. You've heard in several conversations at this conference, farmers are running a business. And so providing a mechanism to use models to basically evaluate how can farmers have basically the most profitable situation they have with the minimum environmental impact, and work with the farmers, have them engaged in that process, because I think it works best if we're all basically sitting around the same table.
Yeah, I don't know how to extend my magic wand here, because I agree much in what has just been said, and I also like what you presented on the tripod. So I think we have to have this mixture on the collective and the local measures, and say what can we do from bottom up, and but being from Europe, we have the Water Framework Directive, and we have something on top that we need to reach. And I don't think that only doing by voluntary measure is not going to get us there. So I guess we have to have some combination. But I certainly would like a much more close collaboration with the farmers. I had a few opportunities during the project, and that actually turned out well in many cases, because most of the farmers are intelligent people, open-minded, they want to know it. But there has been some of the farmers, I had to admit, that had been in survival mode, and that means that just and that takes a lot more time to go to.
I'll just try to add something complementary. I think a lot of the suggestions are really good here, and so I absolutely agree with them. But if you were addressing people at a high level, like we work with agriculture ministers and things, and it's really valuing the water issues in agriculture. They're undervalued, and they tend to be, in the discourse, they're like, oh, we need to keep our natural resources, etc. We had a ministerial level meeting in April where we had about 40 ministers of agriculture, including Secretary of Agriculture of the U.S., and a lot of discourse where really you should put more into climate change adaptation, into reducing impacts on natural resource. And then a few weeks after, we had sort of our meeting of the committee that decides what they want us to work on, and this is agriculture again. So there are sort of sub-level types of ministerial people, and those issues were sort of remain on the side. We don't really, there is natural resource and climate change. Oh yeah, we should perhaps do something about that. So sort of how to go from the discourse at the very high level, which is good, pushing more. We even have, we work with the G20, which are the biggest 20 countries, and next year the theme is agriculture and water. That's a big deal for us. It's Germany that is the president of next year. And so we have opportunities to make more noise on agriculture and water issues, including groundwater. But how do you trickle down that to actions? And then, of course, all those interactions that we mentioned, information and farmers, etc.
Okay, thank you very much. In looking at our time here, we're sort of out of time. And I want you to just maybe join me in thanking our panel for a great session today.